first, and then they simply follow your example. Most people spend their lives trying to earn respect by giving more. They become available whenever someone calls. They say yes when they desperately want to say no. They over-explain every decision, over-deliver every favor, and over-sacrifice their own priorities just to avoid disappointing others. They believe this generosity will make people appreciate them. But psychology often produces the opposite result. Every time you repeatedly place someone else's needs above your own, you silently communicate one dangerous message: my value is always available. And when something appears unlimited, the human mind stops treating it as precious. Robert Greene repeatedly demonstrates that power begins with perception. Before people respect your abilities, they judge your standards. Before they admire your success, they observe how easily your attention can be obtained. If they discover that a little praise can control you, they will use praise. If they discover that guilt can control you, they will use guilt. If they realize you fear rejection more than you value yourself, they don't even need to manipulate you. You will manipulate yourself. This is why protecting your value is not arrogance. It is psychological self-defense. Think about the people who are constantly taken for granted. They answer every message within seconds. They rearrange their schedules for everyone else. They forgive repeated disrespect without consequences. They keep giving chances to people who have done nothing to deserve them. At first, others may call them kind, but over time, kindness without boundaries slowly transforms into predictability. Predictability becomes expectation. Expectation becomes entitlement. Eventually, people stop asking whether they deserve your time because they assume they already own it. Now imagine someone who operates differently. They are respectful, but they are selective. They keep their word, yet they refuse to abandon their own priorities simply to gain approval. They help people because they choose to, not because they fear being disliked. Their attention is intentional, not automatic. Their time is protected because they understand it is one of the few resources they can never replace. Without raising their voice or demanding respect, they create an entirely different psychological effect. People naturally become more careful around them because they understand that access to this person's energy is a privilege, not a guarantee. This is where the dark psychology of value becomes impossible to ignore. Human beings instinctively protect what they believe they could lose. The possibility of loss creates appreciation in ways unlimited access never can. When people know you will always be there, regardless of how they treat you, they stop investing in the relationship. But when they realize your presence depends on mutual respect, their behavior begins to change. They think before crossing your boundaries. They become more aware of your time. They stop assuming your loyalty is permanent simply because it has always been available. None of this requires becoming cold, selfish, or manipulative. True value is not created by pretending to be important. It is created by genuinely respecting yourself enough to protect what matters. Your attention is valuable, your energy is valuable, your peace of mind is valuable. And if you constantly trade those things for temporary approval, people unconsciously learn that your value has no price. The moment you stop making that trade, the entire dynamic changes. Never forget that people are always watching your behavior more closely than your words. You can tell the world to respect you, but if your actions constantly communicate desperation for acceptance, they will believe your actions instead. The strongest message you can ever send is not spoken. It is demonstrated every time you refuse to sacrifice your standards just to remain convenient in someone else's life. And once you stop giving your value away for free, the next step is becoming emotionally untouchable, because nothing commands respect faster than a person whose emotions cannot be manipulated. The moment you stop giving your value away for free, people begin searching for another way to influence you. They may no longer control your time as easily, but they will often try to control your emotions instead. This is where the real test begins. Many people protect their schedule, but fail to protect their emotional state. They become upset by criticism, excited by praise, shaken by rejection, and distracted by the opinions of others. Without realizing it, they have simply exchanged one form of dependence for another. The dark psychology of value teaches that true respect is never built on what you own or what you say. It is built on becoming emotionally impossible to manipulate. Robert Greene often reveals that the greatest form of power belongs to the person who remains calm while everyone else is reacting. Human beings naturally look for emotional openings. They observe what makes you angry, what makes you insecure, what flatters your ego, and what causes you to lose control. Once they discover those weaknesses, they no longer need to overpower you physically. They simply pull the right emotional trigger, and you willingly surrender your peace. This is why emotional discipline is not just a personal strength. It is a shield that protects your value from those who wish to control it. Think about how easily people can predict the average person. A little praise makes them overconfident. A small insult ruins their entire day. Being ignored fills them with anxiety. Receiving attention makes them feel important again. Their emotions rise and fall according to someone else's behavior. From the outside, this appears normal, but psychologically, it reveals dependence. The person whose emotions can be controlled is also the person whose decisions can be influenced. And once people recognize that, respect begins to fade because they know exactly how to move you. Now imagine someone completely different. They accept compliments without becoming arrogant. They receive criticism without immediately becoming defensive. They remain composed whether people admire them or underestimate them. Their confidence is not borrowed from public opinion because it was never built there in the first place. Instead, it comes from self-knowledge, discipline, and purpose. This kind of emotional stability creates a powerful psychological effect. People become cautious around individuals they cannot emotionally predict because manipulation depends on predictable reactions. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing they must answer every attack against their character. They feel compelled to explain themselves, defend every decision, and prove every accusation wrong. But the more desperately you try to control what others think, the more control you quietly hand over to them. Every explanation signals that their opinion has entered your mind. Every emotional reaction confirms that they have found a way to influence your behavior. Truly powerful people understand that not every opinion deserves a response because not every voice deserves authority over their emotions. This does not mean becoming cold, detached, or incapable of feeling. Emotional discipline is very different from emotional suppression. You still experience disappointment, frustration, and anger. The difference is that you refuse to let temporary emotions make permanent decisions. You pause before reacting. You observe before speaking. You ask yourself whether the situation truly deserves your energy or whether someone is simply trying to provoke you. That single moment of self-control often protects months or even years of hard-earned respect. There is another psychological principle that few people recognize. Praise can manipulate you just as easily as criticism. Someone who understands your need for approval can flatter you until your judgment disappears. They tell you exactly what you want to hear because they know your ego is easier to influence than your logic. This is why emotionally strong people remain balanced in both success and failure. They appreciate recognition, but they never become dependent on it. They welcome constructive criticism, but they never allow it to define their identity. Their emotional center remains steady regardless of what happens around them. Notice how the most respected individuals rarely rush to react. Their silence is not hesitation, it is calculation. They understand that every emotional response reveals information about them. By remaining calm, they force others to reveal their intentions first. While everyone else is consumed by emotion, they quietly observe patterns, motives, and opportunities. That patience gives them a psychological advantage because they respond from clarity instead of impulse. The dark psychology of value begins to work in your favor the moment people realize they cannot control you through fear, praise, guilt, or rejection. They begin treating you differently because they understand your emotions are no longer available for manipulation. Respect grows naturally when others recognize that your peace cannot be purchased with compliments or stolen through criticism. Your greatest strength is no longer what you possess. It is the quiet certainty that no one else controls your inner world. And once your emotions become impossible to manipulate, the next step is learning how silence and mystery quietly increase your value without you saying a single word. Once you become emotionally difficult to manipulate, people begin searching for another way to understand you. They observe your words, your habits, your reactions, and your decisions, hoping to predict your next move. This is where most people unknowingly weaken their own value. They reveal everything. They explain every choice, justify every action, and feel compelled to make sure everyone understands them. But the dark psychology of value teaches a different lesson. The more predictable you become, the easier you are to control. The less people have to wonder about you, the less they invest in understanding you. Respect is not created by constantly proving yourself. It grows when your actions carry enough weight that your words no longer need to. Robert Greene often emphasizes that mystery has always been one of the strongest forms of influence. Throughout history, powerful individuals understood that complete transparency rarely inspires fascination. Human beings are naturally drawn to what they cannot fully explain. The unknown captures attention because the mind instinctively tries to solve what remains incomplete. This is why people often remember the person who spoke with purpose more than the one who never stopped talking. Silence leaves room for imagination, and imagination is often stronger than certainty. Think about someone who constantly explains themselves. They defend every rumor, respond to every criticism, announce every future plan, and reveal every personal thought before anyone even asks. At first, this may appear honest, but psychologically it creates the impression that they desperately need others to understand and approve of them. The more they speak, the more information they give away. Soon, people know exactly what motivates them, what frightens them, what excites them, and what controls them. Predictability becomes their greatest weakness because anyone who understands their emotional patterns can influence their behavior. Now compare that with someone who chooses their words carefully. They are not secretive or dishonest. They simply understand that not every thought requires an audience. They let their work speak before their promises. They allow results to answer questions that explanations never could. When challenged, they remain calm instead of rushing to defend themselves. When misunderstood, they don't panic. They know that time and consistent action reveal character far better than endless arguments. This quiet restraint creates an entirely different psychological effect. People begin paying closer attention because every word carries intention rather than impulse. One of the greatest mistakes people make is confusing silence with weakness. In reality, silence often communicates confidence. Those who are secure in their value rarely feel pressured to convince everyone else of it. They understand that constant self-promotion can have the opposite effect, making their achievements appear less genuine. There is strength in allowing people to discover your character gradually instead of presenting every accomplishment at once. Human nature values discovery because what we uncover ourselves often feels more meaningful than what is repeatedly advertised to us. There is another reason mystery increases respect. When people cannot completely predict you, they remain mentally engaged. They replay conversations, question their assumptions, and observe your actions more carefully. This is not because you are playing games. It is because uncertainty naturally captures attention. The human mind dislikes unfinished puzzles. The less information people have about your intentions, the more energy they spend trying to understand them. Ironically, saying less often makes your presence feel larger because people fill the silence with their own curiosity. This principle also protects your goals. Many people announce every ambition before taking the first step. They seek encouragement instead of progress. But once those plans are spoken aloud, they often lose momentum. Truly disciplined individuals understand that quiet action is more powerful than loud intention. They focus on execution while others are busy explaining what they hope to become. When success finally arrives, it speaks with an authority that words could never achieve. Notice how influential people rarely react to every misunderstanding or defend themselves against every opinion. They recognize that trying to control every perception is impossible. Instead, they focus on controlling their conduct. Over time, consistency becomes stronger than explanation. People stop listening to rumors because they have witnessed your character through repeated actions. That is when respect becomes rooted in reality instead of temporary impressions. The dark psychology of value reminds us that every unnecessary explanation gives away a piece of your power. Every moment of thoughtful silence strengthens it. When your words are few but meaningful, people listen more carefully. When your actions consistently match your principles, people no longer need constant reassurance about who you are. Your value begins to speak before you do, and your presence carries a quiet authority that cannot be manufactured through endless conversation. And once silence and mystery begin increasing your value, the next step is building a life so disciplined and purposeful that your presence becomes genuinely difficult to replace. By now, you've learned that value begins with protecting your time, your attention, and your emotional stability. But there is another truth that separates respected people from those who are constantly overlooked. Human beings do not respect potential nearly as much as they respect proof. You can tell people you are talented, intelligent, or capable, but words alone rarely create lasting influence. Respect grows when your life becomes undeniable evidence of discipline, competence, and purpose. The dark psychology of value reveals that people naturally assign greater worth to those who become difficult to replace. The less dependent you are on external approval, and the more valuable your abilities become, the harder it is for anyone to ignore or underestimate you. Robert Greene often demonstrates that true power is never borrowed from popularity. It comes from becoming exceptionally good at something that others cannot easily imitate. Throughout history, the individuals who commanded the greatest respect were not those who demanded recognition. They became masters of their craft, and recognition followed them. Their confidence wasn't built on compliments because it was supported by competence. They understood a timeless principle. When your skills create value, your reputation begins speaking long before you enter the room. Most people make the mistake of investing more energy into looking successful than becoming successful. They spend hours trying to appear confident while neglecting the habits that actually create confidence. They seek validation instead of mastery. They chase attention instead of excellence. At first, this may attract temporary admiration, but eventually reality exposes the difference. Image fades quickly when there is no substance behind it. Human psychology has an extraordinary ability to recognize authenticity over time. The person who quietly improves every day will always outlast the person who constantly seeks applause. Think about two individuals entering the same workplace. The first spends every opportunity talking about their abilities, reminding everyone of their achievements, and trying to impress the people around them. The second says very little. Instead, they consistently solve difficult problems, keep their promises, arrive prepared, and improve their skills without seeking recognition. Months later, who earns deeper respect? Almost always, it is the second person. Their value is no longer based on opinion. It is based on undeniable results. Results silence doubt in a way that words never can. This is where the psychology of value becomes incredibly powerful. People instinctively protect relationships with those who consistently improve their lives. If your presence, solutions instead of excuses, discipline instead of chaos, and reliability instead of inconsistency, others begin associating your name with value. That association changes how they behave around you. They listen more carefully. They appreciate your time more deeply. They think twice before risking your trust because they understand that replacing someone of genuine value is never easy. Another mistake many people make is allowing their identity to depend on one relationship, one job, or one person's opinion. This creates invisible weakness because your confidence becomes attached to something you cannot fully control. But when you continuously develop your knowledge, your communication, your discipline, and your character, your value becomes internal rather than external. You no longer fear losing opportunities because you know you possess the ability to create new ones. That quiet certainty changes the way people perceive you. Confidence rooted in competence feels completely different from confidence built on empty words. Purpose also plays a critical role in commanding respect. People are naturally attracted to those whose lives are moving in a clear direction. A person with meaningful goals does not waste every hour chasing approval because their attention is invested in something far greater. They understand that every day spent improving themselves increases their value tomorrow. This long-term mindset creates a powerful psychological effect. Others begin realizing that your life does not revolve around earning their acceptance. Instead, they recognize that if they wish to remain part of your journey, they must bring value to it as well. The darkest lesson is that people often test those who appear uncertain, but rarely challenge those who consistently demonstrate strength through action. When your standards remain high, your work remains excellent, and your discipline remains consistent, you quietly eliminate the need to demand respect. Your lifestyle becomes the argument. Your habits become the proof. Every decision you make reinforces the message that your value was built through effort, not granted by someone else's approval. Never forget this principle. The world does not reward those who merely claim importance. It rewards those who become impossible to replace. When your presence consistently creates value, people stop seeing you as an option and start seeing you as an asset. That is when respect transforms from something you seek into something others willingly give, because genuine excellence has a psychological power that no amount of persuasion can ever match. And once your value becomes undeniable through discipline and purpose, the next step is ensuring that anyone who disrespects you learns that respect always costs less than disrespect. Once your value is built on discipline, competence, and purpose, there is one final challenge that determines whether people will continue respecting you or slowly begin testing your limits. Human nature is remarkably observant. People pay close attention to what you tolerate, often more than what you say. They notice the jokes you laugh off, the broken promises you excuse, the repeated disrespect you ignore, and the boundaries you fail to enforce. This is where the dark psychology of value becomes impossible to overlook. If your standards have no consequences, they eventually become meaningless. Respect is not maintained by making rules. It is maintained by proving that your standards cannot be violated without changing the relationship. Robert Greene often reveals that power depends less on intimidation and more on consistency. Many people believe respect comes from winning arguments or appearing aggressive. In reality, emotional outbursts often weaken authority because they reveal a loss of self-control. Truly respected individuals rarely need dramatic confrontations. Instead, they quietly change their behavior when someone repeatedly crosses the line. They withdraw unnecessary access, reduce their investment, and stop rewarding disrespect with their time and attention. This calm consistency creates a far stronger psychological impact than anger ever could. Think about someone who constantly complains about being disrespected, but never changes how they respond. Every time they are ignored, they continue chasing. Every time they are taken for granted, they continue giving more. Every time someone breaks their trust, they immediately offer another chance without requiring any real change. What message does this send? It tells people that your boundaries are negotiable. Over time, others stop asking whether they can cross the line because experience has taught them that nothing meaningful will happen if they do. Now imagine the opposite. Someone remains polite, composed, and respectful, but the moment a pattern of disrespect appears, they respond with quiet action instead of emotional drama. They stop investing where appreciation no longer exists. They no longer argue, beg, or seek revenge. They simply remove their time, attention, and energy from relationships that repeatedly ignore their standards. At first, this silence may confuse people. They expected another debate, another explanation, or another emotional reaction. Instead, they are forced to face something far more powerful, the consequences of losing access to someone who knows their own value. This is one of the strongest psychological principles behind respect. People naturally repeat behaviors that bring rewards and gradually abandon behaviors that carry meaningful consequences. If disrespect never costs anything, it quietly becomes acceptable. But when people realize that crossing your boundaries leads to less access, less trust, and fewer opportunities, they begin adjusting their behavior. Not because they were forced through intimidation, but because human beings instinctively protect what they believe they might lose. The possibility of losing your presence often teaches a lesson that arguments never can. There is an important distinction, however. Consequences are not revenge. Revenge is driven by anger and the desire to make someone suffer. Consequences are driven by self-respect and the decision to protect your peace. One seeks to control another person. The other simply refuses to reward harmful behavior. This difference is what separates emotional maturity from emotional impulsiveness. You are not trying to punish people for disappointing you. You are deciding that your life has no room for repeated disrespect. Many people fear enforcing boundaries because they worry others will think they are cold or difficult. But consider the alternative. Every time you remain silent while someone repeatedly violates your standards, you send a message to yourself as well. You teach your own mind that your peace is less important than keeping someone comfortable. Over time, this slowly erodes confidence from within. Self-respect is strengthened every time your actions align with your principles. It weakens every time you abandon those principles to avoid temporary discomfort. Notice how the most respected people rarely announce their boundaries with long speeches. They don't constantly remind others how they expect to be treated. Instead, their actions make those expectations unmistakably clear. If trust is broken repeatedly, they step away. If loyalty is abused, they reduce access. If respect disappears, they refuse to continue investing as though nothing happened. Their consistency creates certainty, and certainty commands respect because people know exactly where they stand. The dark psychology of value teaches that people don't truly learn how important your presence is until they experience what life feels like without unrestricted access to it. Your time, attention, trust, and loyalty are not endless resources to be given away regardless of how you are treated. They are privileges that should exist only where respect exists. The moment your actions begin reflecting that truth, people stop seeing your boundaries as suggestions and start recognizing them as part of your identity. And once people understand that disrespect always carries consequences, the final step is building a reputation so strong that your name alone commands respect before you even speak. Everything we have explored leads to one final principle, the principle that determines whether respect becomes temporary or permanent. You can protect your value, master your emotions, embrace mystery, build undeniable competence, and enforce strong boundaries. But none of these will matter if people see your behavior changing with every situation. Human beings do not place their deepest respect in talent alone. They place it in consistency. The dark psychology of value teaches that people trust patterns more than promises. They watch what you repeatedly do, not what you occasionally say. Over time, those repeated actions become your reputation. And once a reputation is established, it begins influencing people before you even open your mouth. Robert Greene often reminds us that reputation is one of the most powerful forms of invisible influence. It quietly enters every room before you do. People hear your name, remember your past actions, and instantly begin forming expectations. If your reputation is built on emotional instability, broken promises, or weak boundaries, people will approach you expecting those same patterns. But if your reputation is built on discipline, reliability, self-respect, and calm confidence, people naturally become more careful in the way they treat you. They don't wait for you to demand respect because your history has already taught them what happens when your standards are ignored. Most people destroy their reputation without realizing it. One day they defend their boundaries with confidence, and the next day they abandon those same boundaries simply because they fear losing someone's approval. They say honesty matters until telling the truth becomes uncomfortable. They speak about self-respect until loneliness convinces them to accept treatment they once promised themselves they would never tolerate. These small contradictions seem harmless in the moment, but psychology notices consistency more than intention. Every time your actions contradict your principles, people become less certain about who you really are. And uncertainty about your character weakens respect. Now think about the people whose presence naturally commands attention. They rarely need to remind others of their standards because their behavior has remained consistent for years. They keep their promises even when no one is watching. They remain calm under pressure instead of becoming controlled by emotion. They refuse opportunities that violate their values, even when those opportunities appear attractive. They don't adjust their principles to match the opinions of the crowd. That consistency creates trust, and trust becomes the foundation of lasting respect. People know